Morning. As I said, we were supposed to have the UN session on resilience this morning, but our lecturer called a call. So I replaced my session in the afternoon with her session. So I will present first, and then we will have the UN session from 11 to 1, and then in the afternoon. So what I want to talk to you about is a little bit of reflection on the things we already saw in Hong Kong and related to the governance. You remember the session we had in Istanbul about the green infrastructures and then the discussion we had about governance. So we want to do more or less the same thing. But I will provide you with a little bit more input, about this comparative analysis, because you also had it in your essays that how should we do a comparative study. What's the main point to do that? So here is the agenda. We will review quickly together what we see in Hong Kong already to come up with a big picture. It's almost the end of the module. So we review Hong Kong, then I will talk a little bit on the comparative governance analysis. If we can manage to develop a framework that we can do comparative studies with that. Then we will have a quick overview of Guadalajara and Istanbul to use it for the discussion about governance. We want to develop this comparative framework and then use it for the cases of Guadalajara, Istanbul, and Hong Kong, and see if it works or not. It's kind of a practice to make sure that we can do these comparative studies. And then I will talk a little bit about the link between governance and performance, and we will also discuss what we should do for the Friday afternoon sessions. Robert is coming, or?
He said
Okay. And anyone else who's missing? 1, 2, 3, 4.
and he said he will come on the
Okay.
9
Okay, fine. So we just continue. So these are the main topics that we covered already in the Hong Kong module. We talked about urban performance, mostly theoretical, so not that much input to analyze and discuss maybe here. But we had a session on community involvement instead of PPPs, public-private partnership. He was talking about public-community partnerships. Instead of public, we put the community because it's a much more broad topic. Then we talked a little bit on new urban economy, even though it was not that much economy, at least from my perspective. But you see, the topic is important, and we should take care of that. As cities and countries, let's put it this way, as economies are becoming more and more service-based instead of manufacturing-based, then the economy of the city will not work as it was working previously. You don't have big industrial firms with a lot of workers that are working and living in the city. It's now the place that mostly the middle class are living. We had this session on wastewater. Yeah? Do you remember all the discussions we had, and then we had the field visit. We talked about this new town development and infrastructure in Hong Kong, which I think is the most governance related issue till now. We talked about housing with UN, and we raised some questions that we will later elaborate. We talked about metropolitan finance and energy policy. Okay? So, in all of these different issues that you see, there is an element of governance. And this is what this master is mostly about. We want to understand how these systems work. And then the point is that, okay, look, they are quite different topics with different focus. How can we talk about their governance structure comparatively? It's between, here in Hong Kong, they will talk about governance in several different topics. It's about wastewater, economy, housing. So in every module we talk about many issues which are not all in the same category, and we want to analyze the governance of all these sub issues, let's say. And when we move from one module to the other module, we should also be able to compare between different systems. The Mexican way, the Turkish way, the Hong Kong way. So it's a question of how we can compare these governance structures. When you face with all these different topics which are not always coherent, what's the main string that makes them related for you in terms of governance? So here I just want you to reflect a little bit. You have already been in 3 modules and you heard a lot, and it should bring some lessons for you. So I don't want to have the lessons essentially, but I want to understand how do you think when you hear a lecturer talking about different issues, and how do you interpret it for the governance? So can you elaborate a little bit? As I said, we talk about water, transport, housing, economy, a lot of different topics. What is the governance element in all of these different topics, and also from case to case? From Mexico to Istanbul to Hong Kong. How do you compare the elements of governance in all these subsystems and different cases?
You should see the actors. Who are the actors? Who are the stakeholders involved?
So actors, you look at the actors. And can you elaborate a little bit? When you want to look at the actors, what are the main, it's not variables, but what are the main points that you look when you want, you understand who are the actors. I think who they are. And then what are the other dimensions of actors for you?
Power.
The power is important. You can also continue. Even it's John's topic, actor, but he's kind enough to let others add dimensions.
Let me wake up. Why?
Why?
Why? Like the. Okay. Give me 2 minutes. Can you rephrase the question?
The point is that when we want to look at the governance of all these subsystems or cases, one of the main elements that we take into account are the actors. And then I ask, what dimensions these actors have? So John said that it's important to see who they are the citizens, the government, what power they have, comparatively, between these and this, who has the main power, what's the source of the power. So any other dimension for the stakeholders or actors that you think is important?
This is how, no? How, because decision making or making decision is I think similar in 3 cases.
Okay, so but it's another topic.
Maybe you can subdivide the power. Power can be different, coming from different things. It can be coming from what you said.
Sorry?
Maybe it's a subdivision of power. What you said.
But
They will all be
Power
related.
can be, I don't know, it can be the
Exactly.
money, it can be the ability to make a decision.
Exactly. At the end, the decisions are made by the actors. And the way that they can make the decision is to influence on the decision-making process through their power. Which sometimes is resources, it's the authority.
Maybe also their interests, what they want.
Exactly.
Making decision because sometimes only government, sometimes only financial interest, sometimes
So your point is also about their interests, right? Different interests that they
The
have.
decision,
It can be how they are.
Decision-making process,
Like the methodology.
something like the
It
methodology.
can also be how they are appointed, actors.
How they are appointed, I don't know, maybe legitimacy. It's very much related to the power, where the power comes from, because some of them are not even, appointed to be the actor, but they are the actor, because they have some power, the citizens, maybe they are not part of the decision-making process in the formal formulation of decision-making process, but they can influence, because they have some kind of power.
in this country, the political situation.
The whole political situation, so let me put it in context. Which one of the contexts is the political situation?
The another one is the economical situation of the country.
Of course.
Maybe the
And-
flexibility of the actors. Like, is it easy to convince them? Or like,
A little bit
could they
of
change their way of doing? I mean, depends what kind of actors. Or like, what can be done by the actors? They can have, some actors can play different roles and some actors can only play a specific role.
Okay.
You can also like compare city standards actually. Like, which standards are there, like the local government or the local actors, in which standards they have to work, like in some cities, some, I think, areas are like a must, and in some they are not.
Okay.
So it also like,
It's into the context, you think? More or less?
yeah,
I don't know, it's a combination of political situation, I think, that defines what's most or not economic, a little bit, I don't know, history.
history, yeah.
In some cities, some elements are,
Yes.
are the taboos. You cannot talk about them, you cannot touch them.
It can also be the demand of the people in the city. What's the demand?
Okay, but it can go, I think, to the interests maybe, interests of the actors. So,
Commitment with the environmental. This is an important in the context,
yep,
or maybe
it can be the context, where, I don't know, it's a little bit of maybe values, I don't know, because some take care of the environment, some do not, based on their values also, but it's not only values, but environmental concerns, let's put it. What else? We talked about the actors who are taking part, who are attending a decision-making process, who contribute to the decision-making process in a special context. And then we elaborate a little bit what are the main dimensions of these actors. It's important who they are, their power, their roles that they can play, their interests and how flexible they are on these interests, how legitimate they are. The decision-making process we didn't elaborate yet. And the context, we said that the political situation is important, the economic situation, the whole history matters, and also environmental concerns, which is the larger one.
Yeah, history and culture. Yes, we talked about it the other day. Some people want to have a house.
Yeah, exactly. So anything else in the governance process that really matters?
law?
It's
Well-
part of the law, political situation, legal frameworks.
Legal frameworks.
Can you read it yet or? So a little bit on the decision-making process. You know, what are the main dimensions of the decision-making process? If you can also reflect a little bit. I will continue the decision-making here. What are the main dimensions that you take into account when you want to understand the decision-making process?
I think that one decision must be the common interest, no? Common interest in the city, nation. But in the cases, decision making is taking only one actor or two actors, or maybe
Inclusiveness, let's say. How inclusive is the decision-making process? Does it bring all the actors together or not? Valeria, your 2 minutes is done. Did you come up with your idea or not yet? Go on.
What?
It's already covered.
Yes.
So, anything else for the decision-making process?
I think it's the way how the government decide do the development or urban development. You know, if they use like the public-private partnership or they don't like to use this kind of system or try to do everything by themselves. So
I don't know.
they don't have-
I explained, but I name it solution sets. You know, everyone has a set of solutions in their mind. You know, public-private partnership is wrong for some people. They will never approach them, and some are always into public-private partnership. So usually they have a set of solutions that this decision-making process will lead to one of them.
And I think that it should have too like some indicators in order to know if the decision making process is like is good or it have other challenge. But I don't know where to put it.
How shall you phrase it? I don't know. It's about test. It's not testing, but
I think it's indicator.
evaluability. That's not a good word, no?
miserable.
I think the methodology.
No. Let's put it
Para
monitoring.
ver si es productivo.
Es miserable.
Bien, dice.
I put the broad monitoring. It can be the decision-making process, the consequences, how well it can monitor.
And maybe to know, I don't know where I can put it, on which topics should be include the decision-making process. Because not all you can put like to consult to the society.
Yeah, but you know, I think for every issue you decide that okay, this is the decision-making process. But decision-making process is a broad topic that can apply to, you know, for some topics the decision-making
Yes.
process will be different from the others.
I think that as objective situation in the process, in decision makings become a subjective situation because when every stakeholders
Yeah.
make a decision or try to input their interest, is become change the objective. Oh, okay, alternatives, yes.
So they evaluate different alternatives based on their values and on the power.
How we ensure the result is the main point.
So I think we already have a clear idea, but in the governance process, whatever is about governance, we should take into account who are the actors based on the dimensions. What's the whole decision-making process? Because governance is about facilitating the decision-making process. There is no central authority usually to make the final decision, so governance structures are designed for the decision-making, but it's not only decision-making. Sometimes after the decision-making, you want the governance structure just to facilitate, the ongoing process of the system. So you make a decision, that we do this housing project by public-private partnership. But then, there will be a governance structure in the public-private partnership to ensure that the whole things will go on as they were planned. And then the context always matters. So we already have the elements. And what we want to do in the rest of the session is to come up with kind of a framework for ourselves, to help us to compare different cases as we go on, because it will also help you for your master projects. You probably want to compare some elements. And to come up with such a framework, we have to discuss a little bit the issue of generalizability, and the richness of the learning. So if you come up with a framework, if you want to do a comparative analysis, if you come up with a framework that is too narrowed down, everything is put into variables, then you might be able to generalize a little bit. So after a while you say that, okay, these are the set of the variables, I did, 1,000 observations all around the world, about different topics, and I can generalize that if the actors is this, and the decision-making process is that, you can assign some numbers and make everything very, very generalizable, like the things that we do in statistics. So this is very engineering point of view. You try to reduce everything to some variables that you can then relate to each other and come up with the final result. But we should be careful, if we go too far in this framework development, you will lose a lot of the richness of the context that you have. When you do a case study, if you make it that much, structured, then it might happen that you will lose all the richness. So whatever you look at in different contexts, you just, take the main elements and forget about all the rest, which matters a lot. And this is why we go to different cities, we look at different systems to really get the richness. So we will try to develop this comparative framework, but having in mind that it shouldn't stop, your understanding of the richness of the context. And these two are more or less the same. I said the framework should not put you to the point that you forget about all the richness. But it should be well structured enough, and with clear variables. Let's say it's not variables like you use in mathematics or physics, but with clear variables that let you to compare. If you don't have any similar elements in your cases, in your observations, you will never be able to understand the main logic behind it. So I think you know that the actors are important. If you take into account the actors in all the cases that you see, then at the end you will have a good understanding of the different governance structures for different infrastructure systems. Like transport, okay, in transport, these are the main actors, these are the main values, but you don't make it too much deterministic. You have elements that let you to compare, because comparison needs some kind of similarity. If you don't create this similarity by using some variables, you will never be able to to do a comparison. But as I said, don't put it to the extreme to forget about all the regions. And this is what we already did. You know, to find out the main elements. You know, we were discussing how we compare, but ultimately, you know, to compare, you need the variables which you put it there.
Oh, sorry, can
To
you
me,
bring back the previous slide?
the slides you will already have.
Okay, thank you.
So this is one way of asking questions about governance. We all know that actors are important, decision-making process is important, context is important. But this is what I propose. You know, it can be complementary. There is no right wrong answer. So when I personally want to understand the governance structure for whatever. You know, it's about water, it's about Hong Kong, it's about the country, it's a family, not the family, we cannot break it down that much. but to many issues, you know, the governance structure can be analyzed by 4 dimensions that we always talk about. The economy, it's important that who pays, you know, this is mostly, let me put it this way, this is mostly about the process that you come to a decision. To me, this one is mostly about the governance structures that help you to make the system operate. And when you're talking about the governance structure for an operating system, it's very important from my point of view to understand the whole economy, which means who pays for everything, who benefits, you know, from this structure that you have, and what are the cross subsidies. You know, maybe from transport, housing, you cannot always, you know, put a clear line. So in the economy, you should take care of who pays, who benefits, and what are the interrelations between different elements that you have.
Can you elaborate more on cross subsidies?
Yeah. So we want to understand the governance structure of the transport system here. Okay.
Okay.
So we say that, okay, who is paying for the transport? You know, it can be the government and partially the citizens who pay a fare. Who benefits the most? It's the citizens, but not only citizens. It's also the businesses, the developers that, you know, get some value on their lands. And this is what I mean with the cross subsidies. Not all the beneficiaries are always in the same sector. You know, it's not the transport operator who benefits, or it's not the citizen who benefit only. The transport infrastructure, when you subsidize a little, the government subsidizes the transport, okay? And it's eventually cross-subsidize the housing sector because it lets the housing sector to work properly. If there is no subsidies on the transport, then no one can build something in the middle of the desert. So there is a cross-subsidy from the transport section, from the transport sector to the housing sector in the whole industry. Yep.
So since everything was actually connected, so how
Yeah.
we can set up boundaries for those kind of cross subsidies?
We you know, this is what we say, that first of all, we know that we should put a boundary, but these boundaries are not closed boundaries. So you always talk about the system, you should have the whole picture in your mind. And then when you want to analyze subsystems, you know, you said that, okay, I want to put a boundary on the transport. But I take into account that there is a relationship. It can be just an input. I don't need to talk about all the elements of the housing market or housing sector when I analyze a transport system. But I bring the input from the housing sector to my transport analysis. So you put the boundary, but you don't forget about all the influences that are coming from the outside. The boundary is very open, it's not a closed boundary. And you're right, almost everything is related to each other, especially in cities. Everything is connected. So economy was the first issue to me. Then politics is important. As you said, you know, whose values are there in the decision-making process? Who decided that who should pay, who should benefit, how the cross subsidies should be distributed? Is it the central government? Is it the big firms that are dominating the whole industry? This is the citizens. Based on these values and the responsibilities that they have, you should take also into account the accountability issue. You might design a political system for governance of the whole thing, which is not accountable. The main values in the governance structure come from the big firms. Let's say you have a transport network. The actor who can decide about everything, just imagine that it's totally a privatized transport network. The values is the values of the operator. They decide, how much should be the fare, how much investment shall we make, a total private operator, imagine. But then, who will be accountable in this political way of governance, in this political dimension of the governance? At the end, this is the municipality who will be accountable. And we should take care of this issue. The ones whose values are ruling the whole governance system should become accountable at the end. And if we cannot do that, then there is a problem. There is this agency problem. The municipality will lose the election because of the wrong decisions of someone else. Accountability so is important, and transparency, obviously. If you are not transparent, who is related to whom, whose values are really there, who gets the most benefit, how everything is split, then you don't have a transparent system, which brings corruption, bribery, a lot of things that happen in the cities. And it's really tricky, because when you want to design a complex governance structure to address all these different issues that we are talking, it eventually becomes very complex, and complexity makes it less transparent usually. Then another thing which is important to me, at least, very much, is the technical dimension in governance. We don't talk about that always, but when you set up a governance structure between different actors that are operating or working in the system, it's very important from a technical point of view how efficient it is. Now, these are the type of questions I usually ask from these transport operators. That okay, you have MTR, you have private operators, you have a monitoring system here, a monitoring system in the private operators, the other one, and then you have another level of monitoring. So is it really efficient? If something happens, is it technically efficient to have a quick response or not? Maybe economically it's good, politically it's good, but it's not. It doesn't always mean that it's technically efficient. Then this is also important, at least from my point of view. This is my elaboration, so it's a little bit of papers that I put together. But competencies is important. We had this in case of Mexico. You remember the guy operating the light rail?
Yeah.
Now he said that I developed a competency because I could operate my system for 30 years, and I was the CEO from 30 years ago. So I developed some people, when they were 17, 18, I hired them, and now they are my engineers, and this is the reason I can operate my light rail system without any subsidies from the government, which was a very strange case. Operators usually take some subsidies, but the way that you organize the whole governance structure influence on the competencies that the actors can develop, and will eventually have an impact on the performance of your whole system. And also compatibility. It's very close to efficiency, but sometimes you design a perfectly efficient structure for the governance from a technical point of view. Economically it's perfect, politically it's perfect, but it's not compatible. So you have, for example, you have a transport system that is totally divided. Okay, you take care of the buses, I take care of the metro, you take care of the interregional light rail. But at the end, the whole system, the elements are not compatible with each other. Everyone is doing its own thing.
So it is also compatible with other systems in the city.
Also.
Transport and housing.
Yeah. But this is another thing that we usually forget about when especially these politicians who are talking about governance, they don't take into account that a technical system has its own considerations. You cannot combine any two technical systems together or do it whatever way you want because politically or economically it makes sense. Technology has its own rules as well. And then the social elements. We have a system that works perfectly economically, we understand that. Politically, we are clear, technically it works, but then there are also people who will be the final user of the whole system. So there are some basic rights. You see, whenever these people from UN come, they said that there is a basic right of housing. But it's a little bit complicated to make it happen in the practice. You mentioned this favela example. Okay, there's a basic right, we are not going to evict any illegal housing unit, so people can live there, which can bring a lot of problems. For the fares, for the transport, the fare for the water, electricity, it becomes very much value-based, but the basic rights should also be taken into account. We cannot, at least from some perspectives, you cannot design a governance structure for transport, for water, for energy, that all these elements are working perfectly, but a big part of the society are excluded from having the services.
Do you think it's universal?
It's very context based. But it's an important issue to consider. You cannot exclude people, design something that in theory works well, but then you exclude a lot of people.
No, it's cultural.
Sorry?
It's cultural.
Yep.
Because it's very different in Istanbul, very
Yeah.
different in Guadalajara, very different.
No, and this participation, it's not a basic right, but it's something that you see, when we were talking about different governance structures. In Guadalajara, you always have this dialogue of participation, at least as far as I understand. And in Istanbul, you were all shocked that, okay, where is the participation element in all this process that seems to work? Istanbul, at least from let's say an objective point of view, Istanbul infrastructure is working far better than the infrastructure in Guadalajara. But then you were all criticizing the whole governance structure, which resulted in that performance because there was no participation. You think of participation as a basic right. People should have their say. So these social elements should also be taken into account.
I think we should look at that from the different needs of people living in different cities, for example.
Yeah.
In some cities, they don't need no transport system, so it's not. We cannot assume it's their rights, for example.
Yeah.
It's their basic right.
And even basic rights. They talk about basic right of having a shelter or housing, but it's also conflictual. No one in the same room agree that okay, there is a basic right of having a shelter. People will claim that okay, this guy is lazy or it's not good, for the society. So it's all done. And other dimensions in this broad perspective, do you think there is something missing here? Just to combine these two, when we look at a case, and we want to understand the governance structure, I think these are the main elements that we should take into account. Okay, who are the actors? What's the decision-making process? And what's the context? And maybe this is more elaboration of the context. It's not the context, but beside these basic elements, these are a little bit performance criteria for this governance structure. These actors with this decision-making process and in this context, do they result in a fair economy balance? Do they result in a good political situation? Do they result in a technically viable system or not, and do they include the social elements in the whole process or not. So it's really a combination. You should have the main elements. You should have some idea. Everyone can develop its own, but you should at one point you should come up with a clear, more or less clear idea. What do you look at when you hear a story about a case study or a city or an infrastructure?
I'm sorry, I'm still a little bit confused about the values. I know that the values refers to who is ruling the government system or who is behind the rulers. The transparency refers to that the transparency of the whole process. But what about the accountability? As they not.
Every governance system, let me put it this way. When you have the government dialogue, which is basically a hierarchical governance structure. Governance is about how different actors collaborate with each other. So one of the ways to govern a system is to put a strong government who takes care of everything and who is responsible to everyone. So whatever happens, you go to the government, and government is accountable. Exactly, is accountable for whatever happens in the system. But when you move from this very hierarchical way of government dominated to a governance system, which is basically having several actors, which none of them is that much dominant, then this issue of accountability become very, how shall I say, blurry. You cannot really put a line and say that okay, this actor is really accountable for whatever happens. But it doesn't mean that we should forget about accountability, because at the end, people who will suffer or who will benefit will put someone as accountable. And if we want to make this accountability clear, we should have a really clear structure, and everyone should understand that okay, who really makes the decision, why do they make the decision. Accountability will be among several actors. It shouldn't be put on one. But to do this, and to make the whole system accountable, it needs a lot of work.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. If you are to look at the city and if you consider all of the things that we discussed, like you said, initiative organization, what is the private sector? What is the most important segment for the private sector here?
I think they are a big actor.
Big actors in the city.
They are basically big actors in the city, which they have their own values, and they try to maximize their interest here. They try to get the most of the benefit, not to pay anything as much as they can.
And which do you think they get most affected? From which segment they get most affected?
I think it's from all, but mostly they care about the economy, because private sector by definition is profit driven. So the main thing that they take into account is the profit. Sometimes it's very short term, sometimes it's longer term, and if it's longer term, then they really go to the technical issues as well, to be able to build their competencies, to get more profit in the long term. And then in the politics, they are always part of the politics, but maybe these two are the most important things for them. And then the actor who should take care of the politics is usually the public sector, the government, who should try to make the whole process as transparent as possible, to make them as accountable as possible, and to make a balance between the values. It does, the private sector usually have a lot of money, but it doesn't mean that their value system should dominate the whole system.
They will care about the social one. Politics, I don't think they so much.
They don't care, but they are,
They get
the
affected.
public sector should be really careful about the private sector in this political dimension. Also in social dimension. And this probably you remember, this is from the very first session of the IGLUS in Guadalajara. That we said that the governance dynamics is really a combination of all. You cannot separate one. It's about politics, economics, social and technological, and as you said, everything is related to each other. But then when you want to analyze, you make a subsystem and you bring the influences. You just don't isolate it. Making subsystems isolated from the original system is the worst thing you can do. So what I want to do now is to do not an exercise, but just to work together a little bit to analyze maybe one or two cases that we had in Guadalajara. In Guadalajara, we talked about security, transport, housing, metropolitan issues. In Istanbul, we talked about transport, we talked about housing and regeneration processes, the mega project they had, resilience. And now I want to have a group discussion with you together. This is just for being here. You can use it a little bit because these are the actors that are usually operating there. But what we want to do is to choose one of these cases we decide together now and try to analyze a little bit the whole governance structure as a practice, to make this whole framework a little bit clearer to everyone. So, which one do you like?
We don't know about this.
Maybe you can bring something.
Transport?
Transport is good.
Transport? It's so competitive.
So compare.
Transport.
Transport is fine.
Transport is fine. Everyone understands more or less the whole transport sector. Good. Okay, so let me put this. You have the idea if you want to know something, but basically we say that this is only to help a little bit to recognize the actors. We say that usually the citizens, the business users are important actors in the city as the consumers. The city government is important. Different service providers are important. The national government who sets some of the rules and sometimes influences on the urban level is important. The financing actors are important. And the interaction of all these result in the performance of the service delivery in the whole system. But it's very rough.
Can I know why we have to distinguish between citizens and business users?
Their interests are not always the same. This is the reason we just separate them. They will, the performance to the citizens and to the business users are not always the same. For example, the citizens
Labor.
care about a lot if their houses, if their house, the apartment they have, for example, is big enough to have a good living condition and the prices are affordable, blah blah blah. Okay? But for the business users, it doesn't mean anything. They just need a good economic condition that they can charge as much as they can with a good body of people that can. They don't really care until it becomes so severe that citizens go out of the city and then the businesses will start shouting. Otherwise, they don't care what happens in the houses. So the thing that they perceive as performance is not always the same as what they think. Just another example. The developers here, they even prefer, to make it as small as possible, as expensive as possible, because this is what maximizes their revenue. So they are not always the same.
I think I will add to that, maybe in the case of Mexico, the labor unions,
Mm-hmm.
because they control almost everything.
Labor forces also.
So it can be third-party organizations?
Sorry?
Third-party organizations.
Yeah. But let's do it together now.
Yes.
So we have almost 15 minutes to do This I didn't erase because of my name. Okay, so we talked about transport. We didn't really go to the details of transport in Hong Kong, but I think,
Can you write with the
yeah,
black?
I will continue with the black. Issues.
Because the pink is not.
Yeah, it's not really. So in the transport system, that's, I don't know, shall we start with Istanbul case that all of you know more or less? But then the problem is that you don't know.
They can tell
But,
us.
Yeah,
but
you
they can
will
learn.
get it.
Yeah.
So transport of Istanbul. Let's start to analyze the whole governance. And here is the transport of Istanbul. Who wants to start?
What, like the stakeholders or the,
You know, I'm here just a facilitator.
okay,
So
transport?
you have to analyze the governance structure of public transport in Istanbul.
Okay, PPPs. PP.
Yeah, but you have to put it somehow in order. I will do at the end, but
And
okay.
then environmental issues.
Yeah, but put it in a category. You
Okay.
already had some category, so tell us, okay, this is this, then this.
Stakeholders, okay.
Okay, good. Stakeholders.
On the transport on Istanbul.
Yeah,
Did
I
you
can-
need help? I can erase.
No, it's fine. So, actors.
I can fill this in for Istanbul, and I didn't go to Mexico, and you can fill this in for Mexico.
But I think we
Then
we work on one, and then you will understand. So let me elaborate a little bit before
Yes, I
we.
understand.
So in Istanbul, they have one operator of the whole metro, right? One operator operates the whole metro system. It's very much influenced by the national government because there is an agenda from the national government to develop the metro system in Istanbul. And then they have several bus companies, three kinds of buses. They have one which is operated by the same company as operates the metro system. This is IETT.
Yeah.
Yes?
I think
Yeah,
it's
we-
one of the actors.
Yeah, I just want to give a context for everyone to know what's going on. So there is the big operator IETT operates the metro and buses.
No, nothing.
No? They don't?
Not metro.
Okay, that's another. So there is this bus. This is for bus. Then you have private operators, a
Yeah.
consortium of many companies that operate private buses, right?
Yeah, it has buses and operate them, and two different bus companies that operate also the buses
Okay.
under the authority of IGLUS.
So private one, I call it blue and red because they were blue and red, yeah? This is yellow, this is blue, and there is a red operator as well. And then there is this system of revenue sharing, let's say. They have this smart card. Whoever gives a service, any of these buses or the ferries or the metro, have this card system, so they can count how much service they provide, and at the end of the day, they share all the revenues which goes to that smart card like the octopus among everyone. But they don't do any kind of private property development or retail. It's only transport. So it's much more clear there.
So the metro.
And then you have the metro.
operator, it doesn't also do property
Yeah.
thing.
And then you have the metro, which obviously operate this. And IETT has the authority for all of them to set the regulation, the fares, everything. And in the metro, it's basically it's totally public. They decide how much to charge and what to build and how to operate. So you more or less get a glimpse of what the whole system looks like. And now you go. So you said for the actors,
PPP.
PPP. Okay, I will put it in the decision making process. This is PPP is a big solution for Istanbul. They look at it as one of the main solutions to almost everything.
Public and private partnership.
Yes, public-private partnership.
Is it kind of like the Congress?
Different than the
Sorry?
here.
Is it kind of like that?
Here?
Here is public and private
Here?
partnership. No, no.
Association.
The PPP in Istanbul are partnership between the public and private sector. In Hong Kong, it is another mean PPP. Is participation of the people in the decision, etc.
In Hong Kong?
Yes. No,
In China?
In China,
In China, yeah.
yes.
I think
But now let's focus a little bit. So the set of solution is basically PPPs in case of Istanbul.
Yes.
the actors are IIT
Yep, you already said
and national government.
IETT, the national government,
National government, the local government,
the local government, who are the other actors?
metropolitan government.
We call it local, or this is the Istanbul Büyükşehir,
Okay.
because the municipalities are not that. But do you want to add municipalities as well? If I put metro, the municipalities, who else is an important actor in the transport system of Istanbul? You already said that it is blue and red, so some private operators.
The owners of the
The metro is an operator, so it's not like an actor actually.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
The metro company is only an operator, so you cannot say it's like an actor because it works under the metropolitan municipality and only takes orders from that.
But for the buses, we talk about the whole transport. For the buses, can the blue and red, they will resist. You said, we want them to bring new buses, but they will resist.
I think that
And they will influence on the whole system because they will not buy it. What can we do then?
on private you say taxis and dolmuş.
Okay, also taxis and dolmushes are part of that. Yeah. This is another thing.
Maybe the private sector also.
It's basically taxis that should also be taken into account here.
I'm not talking about that. Taxi and dolmuşes, but the private sector which develops a part of the city, for example, makes a decision and in some parts of the city there is too much like private sector concentration and as a result all of the system gets affected, like the transport system, the housing system, all of that. Maybe private sector is also like
Yeah, I don't know, maybe we can, this is your question, but okay, we analyze a transport system. Then there is these private operators who are operating the businesses and the housing market. Shall we put them when we analyze the transport or not? I'm not really sure if we should put them, unless they have a very clear influence on the transport decisions. For example, a private construction company can go to the government and say that I need this metro line to develop this piece of land, otherwise I don't do. Otherwise, I will put them for the cross subsidies. So you think there is this direct influence, or there is the influence from the housing?
But there is something like here you can see that it's too much local government decision that there is a metro line and at the exit you have the shopping mall and the housing, the urban planning with the transport planning. But in, for example, Istanbul case, in Turkey case, for example, like a private sector company, a big one buys a land outside of Istanbul.
I totally agree that they have an influence on the whole.
For example,
But
they,
I mean,
they have like
is it direct or indirect?
they have like 2,000 or 3,000 workers. So
Okay.
at the end, you have to put a bus route there. You know, like so it gets affected.
So you think it's a direct effect of the
Yeah, because you have to provide service and it's
Private.
you don't have to
in
put a metro
transport?
line. You don't have to put a metro line, but at the end you have to put like bus routes. For example.
So these are these kind of discussions that makes it clear, who should be put in this analysis. He said that okay, there is a direct effect from the private operators on the decisions which are made in the transport sector, and then you put it here. If it's not the case, then you put it on the housing or on the business environment, and make a link between them. It's your decision, how you want to formulate the whole thing. So the actors, the IETT,
It is not like private.
sorry?
It's not-
No,
It's not-
it's
no,
not-
it's not a private company.
What was the question? Can you just?
IETT.
Mhm.
I was thinking it's a private company.
No.
No.
It's not-
IETT is called. So these are mainly the actors. And then the decision-making process. We have to take into account how inclusive it is, what are the solution sets, what is the monitoring, and what's the evaluation of alternatives. I think some elements are missing. When you talk about Istanbul, then you will find out, some elements are missing, but we make it together.
First one is missing.
No, I don't mean that these are missing in Istanbul. I think some other elements need to be considered in the decision making. But inclusiveness in Istanbul does not exist
Yeah, basically.
that much. So there is a lack of inclusiveness. Then how the whole system of decision making process is monitored. Are there clear rules? Are there clear guidelines?
It's monitored.
Is it ad hoc? They decided, okay, for this project you do this. Is there any routine in the system to make the decisions? Which actors should be included?
The only monitoring system is that there's a central monitoring body that monitors each year.
Okay, let me put it this way. How routine is the decision making process?
Like,
There is a new
For example, they are going to build a new metro line.
okay.
How did they make this decision? Who do the research? Who make the approval? Who allocate the money? Who whatever the whole process.
It's like having development plans, the local government.
You know why I asked this question? If we know the whole decision making process, then we can go back to these performance criteria, economic, technical, blah blah, and say that okay, this is something that applies for the whole cases of Istanbul transport projects. If it's not very routinized, then we have to do a case by case analysis. And maybe in the longer term we come to a conclusion that okay, it seems that this is the routine, even though they don't call it a routine, but usually the government pushes that. I can generalize a little bit from my own perspective, but
The metropolitan government sets the goals.
Mhm.
It's 5-year development plans, and they do the research, the feasibility studies in-house.
so the goal, that's good. The goal in Istanbul comes from the metropolitan government.
Yeah, but it's affected from the decisions of national
Yeah.
government.
Basically, the national government, which is the same party, tells the metropolitan government that okay, this is the plan, and they make it legitimate, and then it goes on.
Yeah.
Sometimes I guess they collaborate also, but the impact of the national government is important. So the goal is basically a combination of national, local government. this is the goal, and then who decides how this goal should be accomplished? The national government set the goal,
Local government,
and basically the local government.
yeah, the metropolitan government.
The decision about the solution, how we should approach this goal which is mentioned, is basically the metropolitan local government. So
I would like to know, did the central government just assign the goal to the metropolitan, or they have negotiation process?
Just the same, because they are like the same party, they belong to the same party, so.
Yeah, I think in theory they should discuss and negotiate, but in practice, I don't think they do that.
In Istanbul, but I don't know the conditions in Istanbul, so I just.
But they are not, it's not like, you know, the national government interferes with everything, you know. It can say that, like, in a year, it can say that, you know, we need a metro line here. For example, they see Istanbul, they come to Istanbul, and we need a metro line here.
no, it's not totally top down, but we saw that the national government has a very big interest in Istanbul. You remember, you were not here maybe. Victor Vergara was talking about the metropolitan regions. So, okay, they are different, they matter more. And in Istanbul, you really see that the national government look at Istanbul as the engine of everything, the growth, the modernization, everything. So they have a big interest, and they care about the goals which are set for Istanbul. But it's not all the national government. The local government also has a say.
So maybe the local government is actually de facto participating in the decision making of the national government because it's already.
Then, so the goal is basically set by a combination of national local. Then the metropolitan government is supposed to design a way to achieve that, and
The
the
methodology, it's metropolitan municipality and also IET, we can say that methodology.
so the metropolitan government or
Or we can,
the municipality goes to IETT
yeah, and itself also.
and itself, and then what about the metro?
The
No,
municipal
who-
company.
So I mean, there is this agenda. We should improve the transport quality in Istanbul by 10%, meaning how should I say, decreasing the time interval between the travel time between 2 points of A and B, blah blah. Then is it the bus company who decides? Is it the metro company who decides? Or there is another body in the metropolitan level that says that, okay, you metro company, please do this, IETT, please do this.
It's like 2 or 3, yeah, they take decisions together on that, like the metropolitan municipality has a transport department and they get together with IETT and then this municipal company I'm talking about, which is totally owned by the municipality, they take decisions, detailed decisions like that.
Okay, so these are the big actors basically, IETT, metro, metropolitan government.
Yeah.
So the 3 big actors, let's see. And then, what kind of decisions do they make? I'm pretty sure we cannot finish this, but it's good, to understand that when you want to analyze the whole governance system, it's a lot of elements that you should take into account. So we said that the goal is there, the methodology, how we should achieve this goal is developed from a coalition of the big actors, but it's basically the tools that, okay, we do this, we build a new metro line. How do they make the more technical decisions, which are the ones that we talk, economy, political, technical? Now, do they include these elements in the decision-making process? They said that, okay, a new metro line. Then how do they decide who should pay, who will get the benefit, how is it cross-subsidized, how much we should charge the land developers because it will serve them, to increase the property of the land. Who makes these kind of decisions? Because if these are, if it was the metropolitan government, then it was more or less straightforward. If it was totally
It's also
a hierarchical system, they could say that okay, we think that you should pay this, you should pay this, you should pay this. But if there's a coalition,
that's also this coalition, like these three big actors.
the three big actors decides about who will pay, how much they will pay.
Yeah, according to not three big actors, but like 6 or 7 of them. You have also the governorship inside when it comes to fares.
Yeah.
For example, you also have the traffic police of the Istanbul in that, and you also have the metro company, IETT, private bus operators.
It becomes too much.
Yeah, it's like that kind of decisions, like it's
So let me-
taken by a coalition.
A general goal is set by the national government, but when it comes to the methodology, they have to take into account all the elements that we said. The economy, technical, political. Is it technically good, to build 3 different bus routes by 3 bus companies, or is it better just to integrate all of them, give it to one big operator to do that? How do they collaborate with the metro? So there is quite a lot of technical, not technical in terms of technology, but technical decisions which should be made for the economic conditions, political conditions. Will it be transparent enough? The way that they did it in Istanbul. You remember, there are all these municipality companies which are private, owned by the public. They have shares in each other. So you really cannot make them. It's not that transparent how the funds are going in.
Yeah.
But they did it for a purpose. Probably they couldn't decide on some of these issues, so they said, okay, let's act as a private operator instead of public. But technically they solved the problem. Economically they solved the problem. They come to an agreement. Okay, this one pays, and we want a private entity because a public operator cannot charge that way. But they lose the whole transparency issue. So there is quite a matrix of decisions which are all related to each other, and sometimes they are also influenced by other elements. The housing, all these other stuff that you said, that should be made here to design the whole governance structure, and it actually emerges. As we said, there is no clear rule how you should set the governance structure, because as you said, there is a coalition. They should decide on every of these elements, and there we can go also, to their. Here it was good if we could also elaborate, but we don't have the time. For the powers, who has most of the power? Who can really influence on all these decisions? Because if you increase a little bit of this cell, let's say, this will go down. One will benefit from this increase here. The private operators will benefit more if you put up the fare. Then the public operator will suffer because they have to provide more subsidies. They can get more votes. So it's totally a complex system which is based on their values, their interests, how flexible they are. Are they really flexible to do a bargain? What's their power? Who will win the whole bargaining game? And who is legitimate to do that? As we said, sometimes they are not legitimate to make some decisions as a public entity, so they become private. You see, they play with all these. These are not even given. They play with all these elements. So here we said that there is quite a complex system here.
If we chose housing, it would be like much more easy to test. Like 3 big actors.
No, but the idea is not to show you the whole governance structure of Istanbul. It's just to show you how you should go step by step to analyze it systematically. Because you will hear all these different stories. Mexico, okay, this was about crime, the other one was about transport. But if you have kind of a framework in your mind that you can use it whenever you hear a story, you can ask good questions, take the main issues, the main critical things that happen, especially in this part, they want to make a decision. Then it's about the performance, which I want to elaborate now. How all this game is played, and obviously all this decision process will happen in a context. We said that the goal is set basically by negotiations of the national, local, because the political situation in Istanbul is totally different from what you have in Guadalajara. There in Guadalajara, it's a taboo, I think, if the national government tell the municipalities to do this, right?
Well,
You don't even like the metropolitan government because it was all that, okay, then where is the municipalities? If there is a metropolitan government, then what should the municipalities do?
well, I think that in Mexico, local municipalities do whatever they want.
Yeah.
But big projects are constructed by the national government.
But then can they involve in this decision-making process? So Zapopan municipality, can they really go and dialogue with the national government?
Yes. They sometimes are the ones who makes the projects in order to ask the money for the national government.
But it's what I want to elaborate here is that the situation, the context in Mexico is different from the context in Istanbul. And you will see that this decision-making process will differ based on this context.
Yes,
History, culture is different.
In Mexico, we can think on any of these
Yep.
without thinking on the people.
Yep.
People always decide almost everything, or they are involved. If they are.
But this, as I said, it's just a demonstration how we can approach these problems. Then I just wanted to make a link with performance. This we might probably elaborate with Matthias at the very end. But we talked about governance at the beginning. Several actors, conflicting interests. There needs to be an order, to decide on something. And then there are also mutual goals. Otherwise, they didn't collaborate. So these governance structures that you put in place or you decide are always supposed to serve a certain goal. They have to fulfill these goals. Otherwise, you don't design the governance structure in that way. You design it another way. And as I said, it's the tool to ensure that the performance will be achieved. Then we have all these questions that whose definition of goals will be applied here, whose values will be considered in the whole process. And as we said, can we really come to a general framework? I think to a certain extent, to do comparison, we can come up with a framework that, okay, when we analyze governance structures, we should take into account this. But as we said, it will not be universal. You cannot generalize it for everywhere. In the urban governance, the whole political dialogue, they have this discourse that can we really make a framework, a comparative framework to do urban governance studies or not? What are the variables? And they never come up with that. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't use some kind of framework for your own to analyze different cases. And here is what is new. I just wanted to share, but we don't have that much time. But we talked about all these different actors, the context, the process, the different criteria. And then we had this discussion with Matthias after the first day about performance. That what's really the performance? So this is my version. Maybe Matthias will say something else, but I think it can help. We conceive city as a system. We don't make it isolated. So if it is a system, it always operates in an environment. It's the natural environment, it's the political environment, the whole economic environment, especially with all this globalization. So there is an environment which the system as a whole operating that, and the system is made of the subsystems. These are the people, businesses that are really creating the city. And if a city is related to these three three different levels, let's say. You know, it relates with the environment, it has its own whole, and it has the parts. Then we were thinking that the performance can also be categorized in the same way. So we basically talk about sustainability, which is the performance of the system in relation to the environment. It can be the ecological. Hello. You managed to find the place. Great.
It's like a maze.
So the sustainability issue is about the performance of the system as a whole with the environment. When you look at the ecological environment, you will talk about, you know, environmental sustainability. Economically, the city should be sustainable, otherwise it will go bankrupt. You know, the businesses will not come into that city, then you have to put subsidies. So in the global environment of economy, it should operate properly. And then politically also. Now, if the city does not operate politically correct, then people will start demonstrating. No, it cannot. The city cannot become a dictatorship in its own when the whole political arena of the country is a democratic one. No, this system, this city system, the political system should operate in accordance with the larger environment. So sustainability is the city environment. Then you have the resilience, which is the city as a whole. The whole system should not collapse. So technically it should be resilient. If one metro line collapses, then the transport network should not be done. It should somehow survive. Socially, the city as a whole should not be totally segregated. No, you shouldn't have these gated communities. You know, and you will see once you have gated communities, the city is not resilient socially. It cannot act as a whole, and then you will have all these problems which we talked in Mexico. And then you have the economic resilience. If one sector died in the city, like the manufacturing, then the city should not go bankrupt. There should be some other economic activities that help the city to become active. And then for the parts and the subsystem, you know, they should be able to live in this system. So they need a good operational performance. The citizens need to be able to transport, you know, to move in the city. The businesses should be able to make money, lively business districts. So if we conceive of the city, just to summarize, if the city is a system operating in an environment and has some subsystems, the performance can also be categorized in that way. It's my interpretation, but listen. And as we talked, governance is the tool to ensure the performance in all these three levels. So if you remember, we talked about economy, politics, and this other. Maybe the environment is one of the others. The whole governance structure should help the city to operate in a good manner in relation to its environment, in relation to its political environment, you know, to deliver the services to the citizens. So whatever you design for the governance structure should serve all these different performance indicators together. And we already had this discussion more or less. So I am done with the session. I just want to tell you that please, those who take the master, bring your research question, one clear sentence that you will read it, you will not explain it. So on Friday you will just read the sentence that is your research question. One sentence, as I said, you don't need to write a lot. And then your research design in one diagram. It's like a flowchart. Now I start, okay, this is my question, I start from this, I need to gather this information, I need to review a little bit of literature, to design my framework, to do 3 case studies, then do another one, to validate my results, and then write my conclusion, and then the thesis will be submitted. Because we want to make sure that you know the process you want to go through from the beginning. So a one sentence research question and your research design as a diagram on a piece of paper. Please bring it because on Friday we will discuss it in the afternoon session when we want to wrap up. and design your wrap-up paper based on those to help you to move forward with your thesis. Thank you very much. Now let's have 15 minutes break, and Mariko, is here already?